There was a time when the gods walked among mortals, a time when thunder was not merely a phenomenon of the sky, but the voice of Zeus resounding from the peaks of Olympus, a time when the fate of men was woven with threads of gold and blood, and the line separating the divine from the human was as thin as the edge of a blade. It was in that time that a child was born who was neither fully mortal nor fully God, a child whose life would become the most glorious and the most tragic the land of the Greeks had ever known. His story does not begin with a war cry or the clash of battle. It begins with a lie told by the father of the gods. Zeus, the sovereign of Olympus, the lord of lightning, had set his eyes upon a mortal woman named Alcmena. She lived in Thebes, the city of 7 gates, and was the wife of Amphitryon, a man of noble lineage, a descendant of the great Perseus. Alcmena was known for her beauty, but even more so for her virtue. No man other than her husband had ever touched her bed, and precisely for that reason, Zeus understood that direct seduction would not work. So he turned to deception. One night, while Amphitryon was far away fighting against the Telebians, Zeus descended from Olympus and took the exact form of the absent husband. He appeared before Alcmena with the face, the voice, and the mannerisms of Amphitryon. He recounted in detail the victory over the Telebians, and Alcmena, believing her husband had returned, received him in her bed. Zeus commanded that night to last the equivalent of 3 full nights. The sun did not rise. The moon stood still in the sky. The stars remained fixed as though nailed to a vault of stone. And in that prolonged darkness, the one who would become the greatest hero humanity had ever known was conceived. The following morning, when dawn finally broke, the real Amphitryon returned to Thebes. He found his wife calm, showing no surprise at his arrival, and when he recounted his feats, Alcmena replied that she already knew of them, that he himself had told her the night before. Confusion overtook Amphitryon. It was the seer Tiresias who revealed the truth. Zeus had visited his home. Alcmena carried 2 sons in her womb. One was the son of Zeus, the other the son of Amphitryon, twins from different fathers. A demigod and a mortal would share the same womb, but what should have been cause for celebration became the origin of a curse. Hera, the wife of Zeus, the queen of Olympus, never forgave her husband's infidelities. And this time, her resentment grew particularly fierce. It was not directed at Zeus. It was directed at the child who had not yet been born. Hera swore she would turn the life of that illegitimate son into a living hell on earth, and she kept her word. Before the birth, Zeus made a mistake that would change everything. He proclaimed before the gods that the first male born that day from the lineage of Perseus would rule over all those around him. Hera acted immediately. With the complicity of Eileithyia, goddess of childbirth, she delayed the birth of Alcmena and hastened that of another descendant of Perseus, Eurystheus, son of Sthenelus and Nisippe. Eurystheus was born first, 7 months, premature, weak, but first. And by the unbreakable oath of Zeus, it was Eurystheus, not the son of Alcmena, who would receive the crown of Mycenae and Tiryns. Thus, before opening his eyes to the world, the son of Zeus had already lost a throne. Fate had begun to twist. When at last the moment came, Alcmena suffered terrible pain. Eileithyia, following Hera's orders, sat before the door of the chamber with her legs crossed and her hands clasped, preventing with her divine presence the completion of the birth. The hours passed. Alcmena screamed, sweat soaked the sheets, and then a servant named Galanthis had an idea. She ran out of the room and shouted that the child had already been born. Eileithyia, startled, uncrossed her legs for an instant, a single instant, and it was enough. Alcmena gave birth to 2 boys. The first was given the name Alcides, the second Iphicles. One was the son of Zeus, the other the son of Amphitryon. Eileithyia, furious at the deception, turned Galanthis into a weasel, But it was too late. The child that Hera wanted to destroy was in the world. He was alive, but the goddess was not finished. When the infant Alcides still slept in his cradle beside his brother, Hera sent two deadly creatures into the twins' chamber. Two long, sinuous beings with scales that gleamed under the faint torchlight slithered across the floor and climbed toward the cradle. Iphicles woke and cried. Alcides also woke, but he did not cry. With his tiny hands, barely able to hold a toy, he grabbed both creatures by the neck. He squeezed harder, and when Amphitryon burst into the room with his sword drawn, he found the child smiling, with the two lifeless bodies dangling from his fists. Tiresias was summoned once more. He observed the child and spoke a prophecy that would chill the blood of any father. He said that this child would face trials no mortal could endure, that he would slay countless creatures on land and sea, that his life would be a road of glory soaked in suffering, and that in the end, after everything, he would achieve immortality. The years passed. The child grew. He grew faster, taller, and stronger than any other. Amphitryon taught him to drive the chariot. Eurytus, the finest archer of his time, taught him to wield the bow. Castor, one of the Dioscuri, instructed him in armed combat. Autolycus taught him to wrestle, and Linus, grandson of Apollo, was charged with teaching him music. But Heracles had no patience for the lyre. One day during a lesson, Linus scolded him harshly. He struck him, and Heracles, in a burst of rage he could not control, lifted the lyre and brought it down upon his teacher's head. Linus fell dead on the spot. The young man was brought before a court, but he cited a law of Rhadamanthus that permitted killing in self-defense, and was acquitted. Yet that incident revealed something that terrified Amphitryon. His adopted son's strength was not human. It could not be controlled. And if he did not learn to master it, he would destroy everything he touched. Amphitryon sent him far from Thebes to tend herds on the slopes of Mount Cithaeron, and it was there, among crags and pastures, that the legend began to take shape. A monstrous beast terrorized the region. It devoured cattle and threatened the herdsmen of King Thespius of Thespiae and of Amphitryon himself. Heracles, who was then 18 years old, decided to hunt it. The pursuit lasted 50 days, and during those nights, Thespius, impressed by the young man's strength, sent each of his 50 daughters to the hero's bed, desiring that all of them bear his children. Heracles fathered the 50 Thespiads, and at the end of that hunt, he slew the beast with his bare hands. He covered himself with its skin, and from that moment, that skin became his emblem. The boy who tended herds was beginning to transform into something more. On his return to Thebes, Heracles encountered emissaries from Orchomenus, who had come to collect a humiliating tribute that the city paid to King Erginus. Heracles cut off their ears and noses and sent them back. Erginus marched against Thebes with his army. But Heracles, armed with weapons that Athena had provided according to some sources, led the Thebans and defeated the invaders. From then on, it was Orchomenus that paid double the tribute to Thebes. King Creon, grateful, offered him the hand of his daughter Megara. Heracles accepted. They married, they had children, 3 sons, according to the most widespread tradition. And for a time, there was peace. But peace was a mirage. Hera had not forgotten. She never forgot. She watched from Olympus, waiting for the exact moment. And when she found it, she struck with devastating precision. She sent madness, not an ordinary madness, a total, absolute madness that erased Heracles' consciousness from the world and replaced it with a blind and violent darkness. According to Euripides, it was after completing the labors that madness fell upon him. According to Apollodorus, it happened before. The most followed version, the one that sealed the hero's destiny, places the episode before the labors as the very cause that set them in motion. Heracles saw enemies where there were children. He saw threats where there was innocence. And he acted. He killed them, all of them, his own sons. According to some versions, also 2 nephews, sons of Iphicles. Apollodorus recounts that he hurled them into the fire. Euripides adds that when the fury spent itself, it was Athena who stopped him, throwing a stone at his chest that knocked him unconscious. And when he awoke, when the fog lifted from his eyes and he saw what he had done, Heracles dropped to his knees. The hands that had strangled monstrous creatures in their cradle were now stained with the blood of his own children. The palace floor was drenched. The small bodies lay motionless, and the cry that tore from his throat was not a battle cry. It was the howl of a man who had just lost everything he loved. He wanted to die. He wanted to tear away his own life with the same strength that had been given to him. But Theseus, his cousin, convinced him that suicide would be cowardice, that he must seek atonement, that he must find a way back. Heracles, shattered inside yet still standing, set out for Delphi. He needed to hear the voice of the god Apollo. The oracle spoke. The Pythia gave him precise instructions. He was to go to Tiryns. He was to place himself in the service of Eurystheus, his cousin, the cowardly and petty man who occupied the throne that should have been his. He was to perform the labors that Eurystheus would impose upon him. 10 labors. If he completed them, he would achieve purification. And something more. Something no mortal had ever attained. Immortality. It was in that moment that the Pythia called him Heracles for the first time. He was no longer Alcides. He was now the glory of Hera, a bitter name, because every trial, every suffering, every scar would serve only to increase the glory of the goddess who had caused his ruin. Heracles obeyed. He presented himself before Eurystheus, and so began the Dodecathlon, the 12 labors that would change the world. The first labor was to face the beast of Nemea. It was a creature born of Typhon, whose hide could not be pierced by any known weapon, neither bronze, nor iron, nor stone. Nothing could penetrate it. Heracles traveled to Nemea and found the region devastated. The herdsmen had fled. The fields were empty. The silence was absolute. He tracked the creature to a cave with 2 entrances. He blocked one of them with enormous rocks that he moved with his bare hands. He entered through the other. The darkness was total. The stench of death saturated the air. And then he saw it. Eyes gleaming in the shadows, claws scraping against stone. Heracles fired his arrows. They bounced off. He drew his sword. It bent. He swung his olive-wood club. The impact echoed through the cave like a thunderclap. The creature was stunned, and then Heracles did what no one would have imagined. He wrapped his arms around it, he pressed it against his chest, and he strangled it. The struggle lasted until the final breath left the creature's body. When he emerged from the cave, dragging the carcass behind him, he used the creature's own claws, the only things capable of cutting its hide, to skin it. From that day forward, he wore that skin as armor. It was impenetrable. The creature that had been invincible now protected him. Heracles offered a sacrifice to Zeus and carried the hide to Mycenae. Eurystheus, upon seeing him arrive, was so terrified that he hid inside a bronze jar buried in the ground. From that moment on, he did not dare receive Heracles in person. He sent his orders through a herald named Copreus. The second labor was even more terrible. The Hydra of Lerna dwelled in the swamps near the lake of Lerna. It was a creature with 9 heads, 8 mortal and 1 immortal. Its breath was venomous. It destroyed fields and livestock. Heracles set out for Lerna in a chariot driven by his nephew Iolaus. Upon reaching the swamp, he covered his face with cloth to shield himself from the toxic fumes and launched flaming arrows at the Hydra's lair to force it out. The creature emerged enormous, its heads hissing and spewing venom. It coiled itself around one of Heracles' legs. He began to strike the heads with his club, but each time he crushed one, 2 new ones sprouted in its place. And while he fought, A giant crab sent by Hera crawled from the waters and bit his foot. Heracles crushed it with a single stomp, but the situation was desperate. He was losing. Then he called out to Iolaus for help. His nephew lit torches from the wood of a nearby forest, and each time Heracles severed a head, Iolaus cauterized the stump with fire, preventing new heads from growing back. One by one, 8 heads fell and 8 necks were sealed. Only the 9th remained, the immortal one. Heracles severed it with a clean blow and buried it beneath a massive rock, where it would remain alive, but trapped for eternity. Afterward, he dipped the tips of his arrows in the Hydra's bile. From that moment on, every arrow he fired would carry a venom for which no cure existed. No one knew it then, but that venom would return. It would pursue him to the very end of his days. Eurystheus refused to recognize the Hydra as a valid labor because Heracles had received help from Iolaus. But the hero did not argue. He pressed forward. The 3rd labor led him on a pursuit that lasted an entire year. He was to capture alive the hind of Serenea. It was a creature sacred to Artemis, with golden antlers and hooves of bronze. Heracles could not kill or wound it, for doing so would mean offending the goddess. So he pursued it. Through mountains, rivers, and forests, through the seasons, the hind ran without tiring. Heracles followed without stopping, until, when the creature tried to cross the river Ladon, exhausted at last, Heracles shot an arrow that passed between the tendon and the bone of its forelegs without spilling a single drop of blood. He captured it alive. Artemis and Apollo intercepted him. The goddess demanded the return of her sacred animal. Heracles explained that he was acting under orders from Eurystheus, and that the blame lay with the king, not with him. Artemis, surprised by his respect, allowed him to continue. The hind was brought alive to Mycenae. The 4th labor changed in nature. It was no longer about killing or capturing a single creature. It was about subduing the beast of Erymanthus, a colossal creature that ravaged the fields of Arcadia. Heracles had to bring it back alive to Eurystheus. On his way to Mount Erymanthus, he stopped at the cave of Pholus, a centaur friend who received him with hospitality. Pholus opened a jar of wine that belonged to all the centaurs. The scent drew the others. They arrived in a fury, armed with rocks and tree trunks. Heracles fought them. He fired his arrows, poisoned with the bile of the Hydra. Several centaurs fell, and in the midst of the chaos, one arrow accidentally struck Chiron, the wisest and most benevolent of all the centaurs, teacher of Achilles and of so many other heroes. The Hydra's venom was incurable. Chiron, being immortal, could not die, but neither could he heal. The pain was eternal. Later, Chiron would surrender his immortality to Prometheus so that he could finally rest. Heracles carried that guilt like an invisible stone upon his shoulders. Pholus also died, having touched one of the poisoned arrows by accident. 2 friends lost in a single day. Heracles pressed on. He tracked the beast of Erymanthus into the deep snows of the mountain. He cornered it in a snowdrift. The creature sank into the deep snow, unable to move. Heracles bound it in chains and hoisted it onto his shoulders, carrying it all the way to Mycenae. When Eurystheus saw the hero arrive with the living creature, terror overwhelmed him so completely that he once again took refuge in his bronze jar. It was done. But the labors had barely begun. The 5th labor did not require brute strength. It required ingenuity. Augeas, king of Elis and son of Helios, possessed the largest and filthiest stables in the known world, thousands of cattle, decades of accumulated dung. Eurystheus ordered Heracles to clean the stables in a single day, convinced that it was a humiliating and impossible task. Heracles appeared before Augeas and proposed a deal. If he cleaned the stables in a single day, Augeas would pay him with 1/10 of his cattle. Augeas accepted, laughing inwardly, but Heracles did not enter with a shovel. He went to the foundations of the stables. He opened two enormous breaches in the walls. He diverted the course of two rivers, the Alpheus and the Peneus, and channeled them directly through the stables. The water swept away decades of filth in a matter of hours. The stables were left immaculate. But when Augeas discovered that Heracles was acting under orders from Eurystheus, he refused to pay. And Eurystheus, in turn, did not recognize the labor because Heracles had demanded a reward. Two labors rejected. The hero did not argue, but he did not forget. The sixth labor pitted him against the Stymphalian creatures. In the city of Stymphalus, in Arcadia, there was a lake covered by vegetation so dense that light barely reached it. Thousands of winged creatures had taken refuge there, with beaks and talons of bronze, capable of launching their feathers like deadly projectiles. They destroyed crops and attacked the inhabitants. Heracles could find no way to drive them out of the thicket, but Athena intervened. She provided him with a pair of bronze castanets forged by Hephaestus, the smith god. Heracles climbed a hill beside the lake and shook the castanets with all his might. The clamor was deafening. The winged creatures rose in terrified flocks, and Heracles shot them down one by one with his poisoned arrows as they flew across the sky. Those that survived fled to the island of Ares in the Black Sea and never returned. If this story is gripping you, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Here, every narrative is a journey through the myths that shaped civilizations. And what comes next in the story of Heracles will shake you to your core. The seventh labor took Heracles far from the Peloponnese to the island of Crete. There, the beast of Crete, a colossal creature that Poseidon had sent from the sea and that King Minos had failed to sacrifice as promised, was devastating the fields and sowing terror. Heracles traveled to Crete, located the creature, and confronted it hand to hand. He seized it by the horns. He subdued it with the strength of his arms. He bound it and transported it alive across the sea to Mycenae. Eurystheus, terrified as always, released it after seeing it. The creature roamed Greece until it reached Marathon, where Theseus would confront it in due time. The eighth labor took him to Thrace, to the court of King Diomedes, a tyrant who fed his man-eating beasts with the flesh of foreigners who arrived in his kingdom. 4 enormous, untamable creatures, chained with iron to bronze mangers, awaited their daily meal. Heracles arrived with a group of volunteers. He killed the guards of the stables. He drove the savage creatures toward the sea. When Diomedes came with his army to stop him, Heracles faced him in combat and slew him. Then he threw the body of Diomedes to his own beasts. When the creatures devoured their master, they grew calm. Heracles brought them to Eurystheus, who released them, and they wandered until they were ultimately destroyed. The ninth labor pitted him against the Amazons. Eurystheus ordered Heracles to obtain the belt of Hippolyta, queen of the warriors. The belt was a gift from Ares, a symbol of her sovereignty. Heracles sailed with a ship and a band of volunteers to Themyscira, on the banks of the river Thermodon. Hippolyta, impressed by his fame, appeared before him and agreed to surrender the belt without a fight. But Hera would not allow it. The goddess took the form of an Amazon and ran through the crowd, shouting that the strangers had abducted the queen. The warriors mounted their steeds and attacked the ship. Heracles, believing that Hippolyta had betrayed him, killed her. He took the belt from her body. He fought the Amazons and managed to escape. He brought the belt to Eurystheus, who gave it to his daughter Admete. Another labor completed, another unnecessary death in his wake. The gods watched and waited. The 10th labor sent him to the edges of the known world. He was to bring back the cattle of Geryon, a giant with 3 bodies joined at the waist who inhabited the island of Erythea beyond the Western Ocean. The journey was long and grueling. Upon reaching the strait that separated Europe from Libya, Heracles raised 2 enormous pillars, one on each side. which have been known ever since as the Pillars of Hercules. He crossed the ocean in a golden cup that Helios, the sun god, had lent him. He reached Erythea. He faced Orthrus, the two-headed hound that guarded the herd. He killed it with a blow of his club. He faced Eurytion, Gerion's herdsman. He killed him, and when Gerion himself arrived with his 3 bodies and 3 shields and 3 spears, Heracles fired a poisoned arrow that pierced all 3 of his flanks in a single shot. Gerion fell. Heracles gathered the cattle and embarked on the immensely long return journey to Mycenae, traversing Libya, Iberia, Gaul, Italy, and all of Greece. The journey was so long and so fraught with obstacles that some chroniclers consider it almost an epic cycle in its own right. The 11th labor was perhaps the strangest of all. He was to obtain the golden apples from the garden of the Hesperides. No one knew exactly where this garden lay. Heracles wandered through distant lands seeking answers. In the Caucasus, he found Prometheus chained, eternally punished for having given fire to mortals. An eagle descended every day to devour his liver, which regenerated every night. Heracles shot the bird and freed Prometheus. The Titan, grateful, revealed that he must seek Atlas, the Titan who held the vault of the heavens upon his shoulders. Atlas was the father of the Hesperides. Heracles found him at the western edge of the world. He proposed a bargain. He would hold the sky while Atlas went to fetch the apples. Atlas agreed. Heracles felt the weight of the firmament descend upon his shoulders, an inconceivable weight, a weight that no mortal could have endured for even an instant. But he held it. Atlas returned with 3 golden apples, but he did not want to take back his burden. He said that he himself would carry the apples to Eurystheus. Heracles understood that he was being deceived. With cunning, he asked Atlas to hold the sky for just a moment while he placed a cushion on his shoulders. Atlas agreed, and Heracles took the apples and walked away without looking back. The apples were delivered to Eurystheus, and he returned them to Athena, who restored them to the sacred garden. The 12th labor was the darkest of all, the last, the definitive one. Heracles was to descend into the underworld and bring back Cerberus, the guardian of the gates of Hades. Cerberus was a monster with 3 heads, each bristling with venomous creatures, and a tail ending in the head of a dragon. No one entered or left the realm of the dead. Heracles prepared himself. He was initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries to protect his soul. He descended through the entrance at Taenarum in Laconia. In the underworld, he found tormented souls. He found Theseus and Pirithous, prisoners of Hades for having attempted to abduct Persephone. He freed Theseus but could not free Pirithous, who remained trapped forever. He encountered the shade of Meleager, who told him of his sister Deianira and made him promise to marry her. And finally, he presented himself before Hades, the Lord of the Dead. Hades told him that he could take Cerberus on one condition. He must subdue the beast without using any weapon. With his hands alone, Heracles accepted. He faced the 3-headed creature in the darkness of the underworld. Cerberus bit, it clawed, it lashed with its venomous tail. But Heracles endured. He seized it by the central neck. He squeezed. The creature thrashed with fury, but the strength of the son of Zeus surpassed everything that dwelled in the realm of the dead. Cerberus submitted. Heracles dragged it to the surface, brought it before Eurystheus, and the cowardly king shrieked in terror and ordered him to return it immediately to the underworld. Heracles obeyed. It was done. The 12 labors had been completed in 8 years and 1 month. Heracles had fulfilled the sentence of the oracle. Eurystheus, who had begun with 10 labors, had rejected 2, the Hydra and the stables of Augeas, and added 2 more to reach a total of 12. But none had achieved what Hera desired. Heracles was alive. Heracles was free. But freedom did not bring peace. After the labors, Heracles undertook other feats that the ancient sources document in detail. He joined the expedition of the Argonauts alongside Jason. He fought against Troy with the Greeks before the Great War. He fought in the Gigantomachy, the war between the Olympian gods and the giants, where his participation was decisive. Pindar called him the great conqueror of the giants, and it was thanks to his intervention that Zeus secured the victory of Olympus. The hero traversed the known world and beyond, leaving his mark on every land he set foot upon. But fate had one final twist reserved for him, the cruelest of all. In the underworld, Heracles had promised the Shade of Meliga that he would marry his sister Deianira. He kept his promise. He appeared in Calydon, where Deianira's father, Oeneus, intended to give her as wife to Achilles, the river god. Heracles fought Achilles and defeated him, tearing off one of his horns. He married Deianira. They had children, and for a time, there was something resembling happiness. But one day, while they were traveling together, they came to the bank of the river Evenus. There, a centaur named Nessus offered his services as a ferryman to carry travelers across. Heracles crossed first. Nessus took Deianira to transport her next, but when they were in the middle of the river, the centaur tried to violate her. Deianira screamed. Heracles, from the opposite bank, took up his bow and fired an arrow poisoned with the bile of the Hydra. The arrow pierced Nessus's chest. The centaur fell, but before dying with his last breath, he whispered a lie to Deianira. He told her to collect his blood mixed with the venom from the arrow. He told her that if Heracles ever ceased to love her, she should anoint a garment with that blood, and the hero would desire her forever. Deianira, innocent, believed the dying creature. She collected the blood in a vial and kept it hidden for years. The Hydra's venom waited, patient, silent. The years passed. Heracles, as always, strayed far from home. He conquered cities, he fought kings, and during a campaign against Oechalia, he captured Iole, the daughter of King Eurytus, and sent her to his own house as a captive. When Deianira learned that her husband had fallen in love with another woman, fear consumed her. Not anger, fear. The fear of losing the man she loved. And then she remembered the words of Nessus. She retrieved the vial she had kept for so long. She anointed with the centaur's blood a tunic that she sent to Heracles for him to wear during a solemn sacrifice to Zeus. She did not know what she was doing. She believed she was sending love. She was sending death. When Heracles received the tunic, he put it on without suspicion. At first he felt nothing, then a strange warmth, then a burning, and then the fire. The fabric fused with his skin. It clung to his flesh as though it were alive. Heracles tried to tear it off, but every pull brought with it pieces of his own body. Blood poured forth, mixed with venom. His flesh dissolved. The pain was so intense that the strongest hero of all time fell to his knees. His blood hissed and bubbled like water when white-hot metal is plunged into it. According to the sources, he threw himself into a stream, but the venom burned even more fiercely upon contact with moisture. There was no escape. The Hydra's venom, the very same he had harvested after his second labor, was consuming him from within. Heracles seized Lycus, the servant who had brought him the tunic, and hurled him into the sea with such violence that the man's body turned to stone before it struck the water. The fury of the demigod knew no bounds, but fury could not stop the venom. Nothing could. The news reached Deianira, and when she understood what she had done, when she understood that the blood of Nessus was not a love charm, but a venom designed for the centaur's posthumous revenge, horror destroyed her. She locked herself in her chambers. No one heard a scream. No one heard a word. When they opened the door, Deianira lay dead. According to Sophocles, she had driven a sword through herself upon the marriage bed. The vengeance of Nessus was complete. The centaur had killed Heracles and destroyed his wife from beyond the grave. But Heracles still breathed, and his will was stronger than any venom. He asked to be taken to Mount Oita. His men carried him on a litter because he could no longer walk. Every movement was agony, every breath was fire. Upon reaching the summit, he ordered a funeral pyre to be built. He spread upon it the skin of the creature of Nemea, the one he had slain as his first labor, and lay down upon it. He looked around. The few men who accompanied him were weeping, but no one dared light the flames. Heracles asked, he pleaded, he commanded. Only Philoctetes, a young warrior who admired him, had the courage to bring the torch. In return, Heracles gave him his bow and his poisoned arrows, the very same that Philoctetes would later carry to the Trojan War, and that would prove decisive in the fall of Paris. Heracles forgave Deianira in his final moments among mortals. He understood that she had not acted with malice, that the true culprit was Hera, that it had always been Hera. The flames rose, fire engulfed the pyre. The body of Heracles burned beneath a sky that darkened suddenly, as though the gods themselves looked away. The smoke climbed in a thick column that seemed to touch the clouds, and then what the prophecy had foretold from the very beginning came to pass. Zeus did not allow his son to die. A thunderbolt descended from the sky, not to destroy, to transform. The flames consuming the mortal part of Heracles were torn away by the will of the father of the gods. What remained was neither flesh nor bone. It was pure essence. It was divinity. Heracles was taken from the flames and carried to Olympus in a divine chariot. According to the ancient sources, Zeus persuaded Hera to adopt Heracles through a ceremony of symbolic rebirth. The goddess, who had hated him his entire life, who had sent the madness upon him, who had been the cause of every suffering, lay upon a bed and simulated giving birth to the hero, thereby recognizing him as a legitimate son. He was reconciled with Hera, he was accepted among the immortals, and he married Hebe, the goddess of eternal youth, with whom he had two sons, Alexiares and Anicetus, the demigod who had been born in deceit and raised in misfortune, the man who had killed his own children and descended into the realm of the dead. The hero who had held the sky upon his shoulders had found his place at last, not on the earth, among the stars. The Greeks erected temples in his honor. They offered him sacrifices as a god and libations as a hero. Pindar called him a divine hero. Herodotus counted him among the Olympians. His name became synonymous with strength, with endurance, with unbreakable will. But behind the glory, behind the legend, behind the 12 labors and the impossible feats, what the Greeks truly saw in Heracles was something far deeper than strength. They saw the fundamental paradox of human existence. For the Greeks, the story of Heracles was not simply the chronicle of an invincible demigod. It was a mirror reflecting the most complex and terrifying relationship between mortals and fate. Heracles did not choose his suffering. He did not choose to be born the son of Zeus. He did not choose the enmity of Hera. He did not choose the madness that turned him into the killer of his own children. And yet, he chose how to respond to every one of those tragedies. He chose to go to Delphi instead of taking his own life. He chose to submit to Eurystheus instead of fleeing. He chose to face each labor with a determination that went beyond physical strength. Choice for the Greeks was the only truly free territory of the human being. The gods could manipulate circumstances, but they could not control the hero's response to them. And there was a deeper irony still. The greatest strength of Heracles was also his greatest doom. The arms that strangled the creature of Nemea were the same arms that killed his children during the madness. The arrows he had poisoned with the Hydra's bile to become invincible were the very same whose venom destroyed him in the end, through the blood of Nessus. Every victory carried within it the seed of a future tragedy. Every weapon he forged turned against him. The Greeks understood that power without wisdom is destruction, and that even wisdom is insufficient when the gods decide to intervene. Heracles also embodied the question the Greeks asked in every tragedy, in every temple, in every festival. It is possible to redeem oneself from the worst of crimes, not through excuses, not through forgetting, but through voluntary suffering, through service, through the acceptance of a punishment that seemed infinite. The 12 labors were not feats of glory. They were stations of penance, and every monster that Heracles slew was, in a sense, a fragment of his own guilt that had to be destroyed before he could find peace. The Dodecathlon was the longest and bloodiest road ever traveled toward redemption. The Greeks knew something that most civilizations after them forgot, that greatness and suffering are not opposites. They are twins. They are born together, like Heracles and Iphicles, from the same night, from the same bed, but from different fathers. Greatness comes from the gods, suffering comes from being human, and only the one who embraces both can transcend. Heracles transcended, not because he was the strongest, but because he was the one who endured the most, not because he never fell, but because every time he fell, he rose again with the same strength with which he had been born. The flames of Mount Oeta consumed his mortal flesh, but they could not touch what truly defined him, his will, his choice to keep going when everything demanded that he stop. That is the truth the Greeks understood thousands of years ago, and it remains as true today as it was then. Fate can break a man. It can take from him everything he loves. It can send him madness, betrayal, and venom. But it cannot take from him the choice of how to respond. And in that choice, in that infinitely small space between the blow of fate and the hero's response, lies the only freedom that exists in this world. Heracles chose, and his choice made him eternal. If this story moved you, write in the comments, "I too choose to rise."